President Biden yesterday, to much ballyhoo, signed a new funding agreement, which is weirdly called the U.S. National Security Bill, budget money, whatever it is, that's going to have money for Ukraine war, for the Israel war, and presumably for the war they want to have later in Taiwan. We'll talk about that another time. The title of this episode today is Biden got his expanded war funding. Now what? Originally, when I was putting this segment together, I was going to talk about where the money went for Ukraine and where the money went for Israel, and just talk about some of the problems that's not being addressed by either our politicians or many of the so-called experts on mainstream media. But the more I got into this, I actually started getting mad. My blood started boiling. You're going to see why a little bit later in this segment. But here's my biggest problem right now, and what's really animating me today. I almost wish we had renamed this segment Cash for Wars, as opposed to just something named description of what's going on there. That's what this is really all about. Cash for wars, cash to extend and perpetuate wars. That's what you need to understand. That's the bottom line takeaway for what this funding package did. I don't care what all of these supporters are going to tell you, what they keep saying over and over. That's not true. All the stuff they're saying about it's going to help Ukraine, it's going to help Israel in the war, fiction, flat out. And I'm going to tell you why as we go through this, not just an empty statement. The Ukraine war cannot be won by Ukraine with its war with Russia. Cannot be won. $60 billion, $260 billion, 5 years of promised funding won't make any difference. The fundamentals on the war, that go to deciding who wins and loses wars, are irrevocably and decisively on the Russia's favor. Very practically, very pragmatically, things can be counted. The things that have historically always determined winners and losers are just overwhelmingly in Russia's favor. It is foolish to the highest order to continue going down a path that has no rational path to success at all. The administration doesn't even claim to have one. They don't even have a pathway to victory. I think the closest that I've heard so far is this will help sustain Ukraine. That's it. Even Biden has a little bit of integrity and honesty when he says this will continue to help them hold the line. I think that was the phrase that he used. Even that will be limited. You can only hold the line so far. And there's been some considerable battlefield developments even in the last 48 hours that put at higher risk what I've been warning about, that the potential for the Ukraine side to actually buckle and collapse, and Russia could roll in behind it. It may not happen for a long time. They may shore up the defenses, but that's a temporary condition. The long-term things are set in stone. There's no rational way to reverse those. No one wants to talk about that. On the Israeli side, same situation. This money is not going to help Israel win because Israel is on a path where their Prime Minister Netanyahu has chosen to achieve or to seek a political outcome, given safety and security to the people of Israel with military means in Gaza, which cannot be achieved. The path that he has put his country on is one to, for sure, decades upon decades more into the future of instability. And that's assuming that the region doesn't explode into an all-out war. Seeds have been planted already. Even if I were made president of the United States by fiat in November of this year, and I had literally unlimited powers and Congress did everything that I asked, even if that was the case, some of those seeds have already planted, and it's going to be hard to keep them from sprouting in a bad way for Israel in the future in the region. In the strip itself, those seeds are already being sprouted already. So even if Netanyahu gets rid of this so-called final 4 battalions in the Rafah area, it's just fiction to say that then the security will be better for Israel. For very practical reasons. Again, I can't stress this enough. For very fundamental, measurable reasons, that he is building himself far more insecurity than ever existed prior to October the 7th of last year. That's what your money has gone for, folks. So when you see all this flag waving on the House of the Representatives and all these cheers among all the supporters in Congress who voted for all these things and how they think this is going to help anybody, the only one this is really going to help is arms manufacturers. That's the harsh truth of it. Now, whether these people think that, whether that's their intention, I can only speculate. I don't know. I don't know hardly any of these members of Congress. I haven't been able to talk to them. They certainly aren't going to tell me what's really animating them behind, but I can tell you for a fact that that is who's going to benefit from this, because the arms dealers can care less how the war ends. All they know is that they get an order, they produce weapons, ammunition, whatever, and they get paid. It's a win for them. However the war turns out doesn't even matter. And you better know that they are on a big time happy spree right now, because they see, especially in Europe, that with this going on, that there's arms, everybody's ramping up their defense spending, and will be for the foreseeable future. So there is a arms boom right now, even if the Russia war ended tomorrow. So they're perfectly happy with that. And who do you suppose a lot of the campaigns of some of these most vocal supporters that you see in the House and the Senate in the United States Congress? Yeah. Who supports a lot of the presidential candidates? Same dudes. The defense industry is one of the biggest ones. So there's lots of money changing hands right now, and none of it is going to benefit the people in Israel, the people in Palestine, or the people in the Ukraine. So that's your introduction here. That's the reality. Now let's get about looking at some of the details. First of all, we're going to look at the Russia-Ukraine war and some of the things Biden said in his signing speech when he signed the bill to turn this all loose. Let's see some of the things he said, and then I'll give you some commentary. Let's see at this from first.
It's amazing what they do. I mean, it's amazing against such a larger military. Ukraine has regained over half the territory Russia took from them in this invasion. And they won important victories against Russia's Navy. But make no mistake about it, they're a fighting force with the will and the skill to win. The will and the skill to win.
I have no doubt that they have the will to win. What country wouldn't? If you invade a country, they're going to have the will to win. They want to get rid of the invader, and Russia did invade in February 2022. No two ways about it. So sure, they have the will. They do not have the skill. That is untrue, and it's demonstrably true. They had the best chance they would ever get in 2023 to have an offensive, and they literally broke their teeth on the first line of a five-belt defensive front that the Russians had. Now then they're being driven back all along the front. They've suffered hundreds of thousands of casualties. They have lost nearly all of their previously trained men. They're now throwing people into the gap as fast as they can to try and stop the bleeding, and it's not even working at that. There is no path. There is no rational path in military history to where a nation has suffered that many casualties and then is just throwing untrained men into the mix as fast as they can, giving them just minimal training and then putting them in the line. It just doesn't work that way. That's not how war works. And you know, this fiction here about Ukraine is taking back half the territory they've lost. That gives the implication that, wow, recently things have really gone good. No, they haven't. In the beginning, Russia rolled in with its troops, and we're talking like early 2022 on the four axis. You may recall that. And they took up positions in all different kinds of parts of the country, surrounding Kiev in the north, and then several other places in Sumy and Kharkiv, and then down the south around Zaporizhia. They so-called occupied areas that they had no troops to support. They didn't have enough troops at all to occupy, because that was never their intent. They thought that they would have a lightning strike in there and would win quickly, that the political government in Ukraine would see all these tanks in their country and sue for peace right away. That's what they expected to happen. A huge strategic blunder for Russia to basically hope and require the best case scenario to work out, and not have a plan B and not have any resources for anything but a plan A. That was a huge, huge blunder on their part, which the Ukraine side, to their credit, exposed and exploited late in 2022 when they forced Russia out of the Kherson area, out of Kherson city, and then rolled back over like 6,000 square kilometers in the North Kharkiv area. That was by November of 2022. That was the high water mark. And that's what when they say they so-called took back 50% of it, they reclaimed that kind of territory. Not that Russia was possessing it and they were forced out of 50% of it. There was a thin screen line, especially in that north, that Russia collapsed back to the Oskol River to try and stop the bleeding, which they eventually did. From that point, so before 2022 was over until now, Ukraine has done nothing but lose territory. That's the only truth that matters. What happened before that was important at the time. Would have been great if they had a negotiated settlement that could have ended the war before 2022, but they punted on that. They gave it away, and we're all going to be paying for this one for a long time. That's the first one. Next, we move into a different area where, well, he wants to talk about money.
You know, this package is literally an investment, not only in Ukraine's security, but in Europe's security, in our own security. We're sending Ukraine equipment from our own stockpiles. Then we'll replenish those stockpiles with new products made by American companies here in America. Patriot missiles made in Arizona, Javelins made in Alabama, artillery shells made in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Texas. In other words, we're helping Ukraine while at the same time investing in our own industrial base, strengthening our own national security, and supporting jobs in nearly 40 states all across America.
Okay, as I pointed out several times, in the first basically 18 months of the war, the cumulative West gave over $200 billion to Ukraine, thousands upon thousands of tanks, armored personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles, artillery pieces, air defense systems, just all kinds of things, missiles, artillery ammunition, millions, hundreds of millions of rounds of regular small arms fire, everything in the world that you could need. And it didn't do anything. It had no success at all. Like I said a second ago, they broke their teeth starting in June of 2023 on the first line of Russian defenses, and they've been falling back ever since. That's what 18 months, thousands of our vehicles, millions of rounds of rockets, ammunition, and other kinds of support, and it didn't do anything then. What possible rationale, even if you don't know anything besides just the top line numbers, would $60 billion now then, after hundreds of thousands of troops lost, somehow accomplish what didn't happen then, when you know for certain that the Russian side is now much stronger than they were in 2023 when they were just on the defensive? The entire year they were on the defensive. Why does anyone think that's going to happen now? Well, here's where it gets worse. Now, there's a little bit of honesty in that last clip I showed, because Biden is talking about how this is great for the American business people, and this is great for money in all these different states that he's talking about here, and they're starting to get an idea of what this is really all about here. But even when you look at how this money was broken down, as Secretary of Defense Austin said on the 17th of April, about $50 billion of that $61 billion is going to go to America and to our companies. So a very small portion of that. So now look at the comparison of $200 billion and all these thousands of vehicles back in 2023, and now roughly 14 billion, depending on how it's counted. We'll see how that actually works out, is going to them now. It's a fraction of it's like, what is it? Less than 10%, like 12, 13, 14%, maybe less than that even. And people think that's going to make a difference on the battlefield. The advocates keep saying, yes, this is going to work. It's going to be great. And now that's going to finally stabilize the front. They're going to hang on. Why do we want a strategy, even if it worked the way you said, that you want to hang on? Because there is not even the pretending that it's going to win for Ukraine. They just want to hang on, which of course means you should understand this. There's another bill coming, folks. This one just came due now. When the U.S. gets ready for its in next year's budget, at the end of FY 2024, which is coming up less than, I think, 5 months from now, there's going to be another bill for Ukraine. Count on it. That's coming, because this is to hold on. So then they got to fund the next year's fantasy, should the army stay intact, that they're going to want to go on the offensive, and that's going to require another one. Where it's going to go to buy U.S. weapons. That's what this is all about. But the next thing Biden says is he wants to tell you that actually, you know what? We have to do this not just for Ukraine, but for ourselves, because holy cow, if he gets through there, he's coming for us.
As I've argued for months, this is directly in the United States' national security interest. If Putin triumphs in Ukraine, the next move of Russian forces could very well be a direct attack on a NATO ally. And you all know full well that invoking Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty would be the first thing that comes to mind, which declares an attack on one as an attack on all. If Putin attacks a NATO ally like he's attacking Ukraine today, we'd have no choice but to come to their aid.
Okay, first of all, I'm going to educate some people who may not know that last thing he said specifically, we would have no choice but to go to war to fight for their aid if any nation is attacked. That's not true. That is not true by the NATO Charter, and it is definitely not true by the United States Constitution. Did you know that when the Article 5 component of the Washington Treaty back in 1949, when it was signed during the debate, it was a hot topic within the U.S. Congress because they said, hang on, we're not going to get into any kind of automatic triggers. We're going to take a situation that occurs at any time, and we're going to take our national interest at stake and make a decision what we should do. We're going to continue to follow the U.S. Constitution for our country. Every other country had the same deal. That was part of the treaty. So that if one is attacked, it is considered an attack on all. Then, and the treaty specifies this, every nation decides on its own whether this is in their national interest and whether they're going to provide ammunition, whether they're going to send troops into, et cetera. Whatever they feel is in their interest to do. That's what the treaty actually says. So there's no automatic trigger for war if one gets in there. That's an important distinction to make because that means that we still follow our own laws, where only Congress can declare war on another, not some article in a treaty halfway around the world. We're not listening that way. But the bigger issue here, that's the more prominent, is his claim again that they're coming for us if they get rid of Ukraine. Now, Russia has been making some gains since I guess really since the beginning of this year, since they took the Bakhmut toward the end of last year. They took Avdiivka here recently, and they've been making a little bit more progress. And in comparison, they've actually made some pretty big moves here in the last week or so. 600 meters in a day, a kilometer in a day, 6 kilometers in one particular area over about a 7 or 8 day period, which is, almost lightning speed in comparison to how this war's gone. But when you look at the overall line, it's hardly moved at all this year. It has continued to methodically move to the west, but only when you zoom down and look at any particular battlefield. When you zoom back and look at the map of the country, it's really hard to see where this is. Do you see where this is going, right? If Russia has this much trouble for a city of, I think Bakhmut was about 70,000. Avdiivka was, I want to say 30,000, something along those lines. They're going after Chasiv Yar right now, which is 12,000. And it's taken them multiple weeks to make progress in here. What do you think that the chances are that this Russian army, as much as it's improved here, is going to be able to storm a major European city, millions, or even Kharkiv city? There's some evidence that that's actually next on the target list for Russia. And I assure you that is going to be a long, long siege because it is extremely expensive in manpower to take a modern city, as you see Russia prove on these towns and villages that they're struggling to get through now. So the idea that Russia could finish off Ukraine at some future date and then roll into and they would then choose to roll into a 32-member alliance where there are potentially all these armies could come to there, especially those in the eastern flank of NATO. You can be sure they will definitely, because some of them want to do it now. So it would be suicidal and foolish to the highest degree for any nation that doesn't have any treaty partners, maybe Belarus, to attack conventionally into a 32-member alliance, multiple people of which elements of which have nuclear weapons. They wouldn't do it. Even if he desperately desired to, he's not stupid. And if anything, Putin has shown really throughout since 1999 is that he's very calculated and he's not stupid. He's made some he's overreached in some areas here. He's made some bad calculations, but he's not stupid, and he's not going to be in the future either. So Biden knows that. His leaders know that, but they keep using it over and over to try and scare you into going to this direction. Well, we got one more in this section here. And now then we're going to look at some American hubris. Now then let's beat our chest a little bit and say how good this is for us.
We don't walk away from our allies. We stand with them. We don't let tyrants win. We oppose them. We don't merely watch global events unfold. We shape them. That's what it means to be the indispensable nation. That's what it means to be the world's superpower and the world's leading democracy. But this vote makes it clear. There is a bipartisan consensus for that kind of American leadership. That's exactly what we'll continue to deliver.
So we want to shape the future. We want to tell everybody else what they're going to do. And we are that indispensable nation. Come on, man. It's time to just acknowledge we're not the most powerful nation on earth that is so strong that we can dictate to everybody else what they're going to do, that we could just choose, as he is implying here, that we will tell Europe what to do. We'll tell Russia what to do. We'll tell North Korea, Iran, China. We'll tell everybody what to do. That's American leadership. That's arrogance. That's presumptuous arrogance that's not matched by reality. Here is the reality. We are a very powerful nation. We have the number one economy. And even though China is rising and India is rising, we still have the most powerful economy, especially per capita. We have a tremendous military with global reach and the ability to project power that no other nation on the planet has. They don't have that capacity that we have here. However, that is not to say that we have unlimited power. That is not to say that there are not other areas where in some regions of the world, some states have more power than we do. Now, if we're talking about defending our borders, the two coasts and the north and south, we can do that. And we have no reason to fear at all an invasion. But you start going on a projecting power into the Indo-Pacific, for example, and you want to think that you're going to go to war with that power in their backyard, you're going to have another thing coming if you think that we can just dictate terms and just win the war because we want to. Conventionally, we don't have that kind of power. We would lose conventionally if we get into a war with China. And of course, the issue of the possibility of it going nuclear is dangerously off the charts, and we should never even attempt to do that. We don't need to fight China over Taiwan in the Indo-Pacific for our national security. We will remain safe no matter what, as long as we don't suck ourselves into a war through arrogance. And it's saying, well, that can't stand, so we're going to fight. Same situation in the Russia-Ukraine war situation right now. We have no business going and fighting a war with Russia. We have nothing to gain. We're not being threatened. We don't need to do that. This issue between Russia and Taiwan and Ukraine is a long-standing, simmering dispute that's likely not going to go away anytime in the foreseeable future. Even after this war is done, it's going to continue to simmer. And the hatred that's been built up on both sides has every possibility, if not carefully managed by everybody involved, to exploding again in a war in the future. We don't need to be involved in that at all. We need to contain it and to keep it from spilling into our treaty allies in Western Europe. And if we do that, if we're wise and have the normal amount of humility to recognize there are some limits to our power, we have no reason to fear the future. We will be safe from conventional war or nuclear war. We'll continue to be able to prosper economically. All of those things are on the table. We can do, as long as we don't keep with this hubris and this arrogance that we are the most powerful world in the history of the nation. We can do whatever we want, because we can't. As long as we recognize our genuine power, but that it's not unlimited, we're going to be fine. That's what I hope we do. All right, that's the part of this funding bill that had to do with the Russia-Ukraine war. Now let's shift over to the Israeli-Hamas war, because there's some problems here too. And first of all, let's start off with what Biden had to say on that part of the conflict.
This bill includes $1 billion for additional humanitarian aid in Gaza. We're going to immediately secure that aid and surge it, including food, medical supplies, clean water. And Israel must make sure all this aid reaches the Palestinians in Gaza without delay.
Okay, now I said at the outset here that Netanyahu has embarked and put his country on a path that cannot succeed. He is absolutely building trouble and chaos as far as the eye can see into the future, in his own backyard, in his front yard, and in his region, all throughout the area there. So he is building up huge trouble for himself. There's also huge issues between Israel and the United States that he is building, and that our leadership is fostering. Big problems with our country and with Israel. And this has to do with who we are as a nation and who we want to be. Because right now, what Netanyahu is choosing to do is to use maximum violence to achieve his political aims, which again can't be accomplished, but he is blinded to that. He is blinded to the limits of power. He thinks that the exercise of combat power can just be forced into obliterating all the human issues that do matter in wars and determine the outcomes, and that he can do whatever he wants and just he's going to win at the end if he just kills enough people and blows up enough stuff. I don't care what words come out of his mouth, folks. I don't care how much you like Israel, how much you have historically liked them, and I count myself in that category. I have, but forget about all that stuff here. Let's look at the ground truth reality. That's one of the hallmarks of our show. We're unintimidated and uncompromised. I don't care what anybody thinks about it. This is the truth, what I'm telling you right now. We'll benefit from it if we recognize the truth. The truth is that Netanyahu cares nothing about the people in Palestine, and he is on the record as saying this, and you're going to see examples of some of that here in just a second. But then he'll tell you on these sound bites where he gets on Western media, he's going to say all the right words, almost none of which are true. He's going to say them with conviction and with passion that we're the victims here. This is all about what Hamas did to us. There are no other factors. Everything is the way I tell you it is. Here's the problem with that. If you want to be a demagogue, that's up to you. Here's my problem is when American leaders start echoing the demagoguery to our own harm. Because right now, the American people aren't buying this stuff. Our leaders seem to be, our leaders are, but the American people in larger numbers are starting to get really upset and have a real problem because they see the truth of it. They see that the Palestinian people are being just obliterated in large numbers. The entire Gaza Strip has now been rendered uninhabitable for normal habitation. The people don't even have the capacity. Over 2 million of them. They don't even have the capacity to live anymore. They are now 100%, literal number, dependent on external food aid as far as the eye can see, because obviously the war continues on and Israel continues to this day to continue to destroy the infrastructure in that. People continue to die to this day and towards no identifiable objective that's attainable at any rate. But the destruction keeps going on. And American people are rightfully just revolted by this. Everything in our character, and our history has always been about protecting the weak, about helping especially the women and the children. We go even, to areas in Africa sometimes, in the Middle East and Asia. We always want to go and help the people who are powerless, who are being exploited by those with power. That's a hallmark of our nation, except in this current situation here, we're being blinded by the deception coming out of the Israeli leadership. And again, folks, I know that's going to make some of you mad, and I'm sorry about that, but it's the absolute hardcore truth. Now, let me show you what I mean when I say American politicians are now basically being the mouthpiece of the Israeli government. And you're going to be shocked, or some of you may be shocked by some of this. Some of you may not be shocked at all. You may think this is underselling it, but here's what we got. So first of all, as you may have seen, there's been a lot of protests at American universities around the country. Now, majority of the media so far has been saying these are anti-Semitic, pro-Hamas demonstrations all over America. And people are saying, oh my gosh, and some of the commentators, this is terrible. I can't believe that people in our country are actually promoting terrorist organizations. That's the claim. And so because of all this, and a lot of the reports are that some of the Jewish students are feeling unsafe. They've been threatened. And look, some of that's legit. They actually have been. There are a rise in anti-Semitic activity. That's not just a claim. There's a lot of truth to that. But here's the issue that we have to look at. Number one, it's not all that. And in fact, the vast majority is not anti-Semitic at all. And there's a reason why the rise in the actual anti-Semitism. It's not coming out of nowhere, which is what the Israelis claim, as you'll see in a minute. Here's the actual truth. So in light of all of this, I don't know why, but the Speaker of the House of Representatives somehow decided it was important for him to go and try to take care of this situation. So he went to Columbia University to speak about what's going on there, and check out these two clips about what he said. First of all, he's going to talk here about how it is absolutely anti-Semitism.
The point we tried to make today is that this is not who we are as Americans. This is not an expression of the First Amendment. This is not an exchange of ideas. This is threats and intimidation of violence against Jewish students for who they are, for their faith. And that's a terrible trend that's going on in the country right now. We have these similar types of activities in and what are becoming violent protests on campuses around the country. And members of Congress, I believe, have an obligation, a responsibility to speak about this and to demand that it come to an end, because it's not good for us.
Okay, that's a lie. That is flat out a lie, or he's so badly misinformed that he thinks he's saying something that's true. But he is badly mischaracterizing what's happening in Columbia and at universities all over the country here. It is not an anti-Israeli protest against Jewish students, which is what he just said. He said this, it's unconscionable. This is not who we are as Americans. And he's right. That's not who we are as Americans. And that's not what this is. That's not what these people are saying. What they're saying is they find reprehensible this exceptional, egregious loss of innocent life in the Palestinian areas of Gaza. Everybody recognizes that the Jews had an absolute right to defend themselves after what happened on October 7th of last year. I'm not aware of anybody who says they should have just let it go. No, they had every right under international law, under just human common sense to go after it. But crucial point here, and this goes for everybody in the world, and if there's any kind of international law or any kind of rules that govern relations between people, you don't have a blank check to do whatever the hell you want to do in response. There are laws of war. There are international law. There's just human dignity involved. You can't say because we had 1,200 people that were wrongly murdered on October 7th that now we're going to go and kill 34,000 people so far in response and destroy the ability for them to even survive. That is wrong. And it just angers me that I never hear that coming out of Johnson's mouth. I never hear any kind of sympathy whatsoever for these thousands upon thousands of innocent people. And there's at least 70,000 who have been wounded and hurt besides that. You may have heard that there's sometimes that some children have had to have amputations without anesthesia. Without anesthesia. Where's the outrage on that? Where is the holding people accountable for that? Why do we not care about that? It just angers me to no end. In that same interview with Johnson, the reporter tried to give him a chance to say, well, yeah, we care a little bit about the Palestinian people, and watch how he punts on this one.
Do you think that protesting the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, protesting the tens of thousands of innocent people who have died there, is anti-Semitic in and of itself?
I think there's always a place for debate in the free exchange of ideas, but let's not equivocate on what's happening in Hamas, with Hamas and in Gaza. This is a battle, as Netanyahu said, Prime Minister Netanyahu said, between good versus evil, light versus darkness, civilization versus barbarism. This isn't a close call. We have terrorists who preyed upon and attacked viciously and killed many innocent Israelis. And the idea that they would be out here in support of that, Hamas is using civilians as shields for themselves. They put their operations under hospitals and schools. They are using civilians in a theater of war. And so it's difficult. Why would someone blame Israel for trying to stamp out the very terrorist threats that are right there on the doorstep? We should not be dictating to Israel their military strategy. We should be supporting our ally, which is the only stable democracy in the Middle East.
Is there anything Israel could do that would be over the line for you? Because when you talk about stamping it out, I mean, many innocent children have died and are dying at Israel's hands in the IDF.
There have been civilians murdered, but that is not the fault of Israel. It's the fault of the terrorists, the Hamas operators and soldiers, the terrorists who have used these people and put them into harm's way.
That is absolutely straight out of Benjamin Netanyahu's mouth and his government spokesman. I'm shocked at how much, I mean, was he just looking at the talking points provided by Tel Aviv when he was at that interview? I'm just shocked at how inaccurate what he said was. So yes, October 7th happened. Yes, Israel has the absolute right to go after it. No, it does not have the right to wipe out a peoples. See, that canard they keep rolling out there over and over. Well, Hamas is using their civilians as a shield, and they go to hospitals and schools and all this kind of stuff. If all we saw destroyed were hospitals and schools and a handful of places where they were hiding, then it would be somewhat more plausible, somewhat. But you see the Gaza Strip has been obliterated. Engineering capacities, their ability to have water treatment facilities, electricity production facilities, farms, greenhouses, everything needed to support life is being systematically wiped out. So this claim that, oh, well, there was a Hamas there, you realize that there's no proof to any of this. They just say whatever they want. And as you're going to see referred to here in a minute, in some of these hospitals, there is evidence of mass crimes by the Israeli people, by the IDF, where there are mass graves of hundreds of people have been killed and then buried in these mass graves. Not that they're looking for terrorists. These are men, women, old people, patients, some of them naked, some of them with their hands tied behind their backs. That's not going after Hamas. That is the systematic destruction of an area. Why should America be funding this and doing it in our name and then defending the people who are conducting this here? And you think that I'm kidding when I say that that's basically talking points from Netanyahu? Check this out from Netanyahu and tell me how similar it sounds.
And this tells us that there's an anti-Semitic surge here that has terrible consequences. We see this exponential rise of anti-Semitism throughout America and throughout Western societies as Israel tries to defend itself against genocidal terrorists who hide behind civilians. Yet it is Israel that is falsely accused of genocide, Israel that is falsely accused of starvation and all sundry war crimes. It's all one big libel.
Is it? Is it really one big libel? Is it image? Is it fake news that Israel is wiping out the ability to live here? It's not that there's no reason for this. It's not that there's no reason for these protests. That was the context of his statement there. That was yesterday about Columbia University and several of these other places. He was talking about the same thing. And he's saying that they are wrong. This is anti-Semitism. Is it, though? Is it really anti-Semitism? Or is it that you're slaughtering so many innocent people? Here is what a Jew who was in that protest is saying about that, what actually happened in Columbia.
To me, that really tells the story of what's at stake here, which is that the students fighting for Palestinian liberation are part of an interracial coalition. So many Jewish students, Muslim students, Black, Brown, Arab students working together for the cause of freedom on one side. And then on the other side, you have political opportunists like the House Speaker who will take any excuse they can get to come after that kind of interfaith, multi-generational coalition fighting for freedom. And right now it happens to be under the guise of something like anti-Semitism. But, there's no substance to it at all. And I think anybody who came to campus and saw the worst prosecution that the Jewish students on campus are facing is from Columbia University. We were disproportionately banned by Columbia because so many of us are part of the Gaza Solidarity Encampment trying to prevent a genocide in our name.
So that's a Jewish woman in support with other Jewish students that are in support of not killing innocent people in Palestine. They're Jews. They're proud to be Jews. They don't hide it. But they're saying what the Jewish government is doing, what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing, is abhorrent to them, and they're protesting. So when I see then Mike Johnson say, oh, this is all about anti-Semitism, and they don't have the right to speak. This is not a free speech issue. Of course it's a free speech issue. Absolutely. That's as American as apple pie. At least it used to be. At least the America that I grew up in. But now you're saying that because Benjamin Netanyahu gave you talking points and you don't like what they're saying, you're just stripping away their right to speech. You're stripping away their right. Even the government governing authorities at the university itself, stripping them away, banning them from campus, but bringing all kinds of other speakers on who say the opposite. So it is absolutely a free speech issue. I don't care what anybody says. The facts are there and self-evident. You can lie to yourself. You can pretend otherwise. It doesn't change reality. It just means that we're trying to use power to suppress people's talking that we don't want to. It means that we're subordinating American interests and American money to the benefit of another government that is taking actions which historically had been antithetical to American interest and values. That's what makes me so angry. And Netanyahu say that he said also in there that these stories are fake about starvation. Really? So first it was anti-Semitism. I just showed you that was BS. Now that he says the starvation, it's not true. Roll this tape.
Footage from the Kamal Adwan Hospital, which is in northern Gaza. And that is where we have seen the first reported deaths of malnourished children. The health ministry there says 15 children have so far died, but groups that we've spoken to, such as Oxfam and UNICEF, say 100% of the children in Gaza now are not getting enough food to eat. At that clinic for pregnant moms I mentioned, the doctor there told us that more than 20% of the women are dangerously malnourished. Many people are eating just one meal a day, sometimes out of a can, when flour shipments can't get through.
Is that fake news too? Is that fake news that you saw with your own eyes? Children are starving to death. Do you know how painful it is to starve to death? It is excruciatingly painful. And the malnourishment that leads into that is extremely painful. And here's these kids before your very eyes, literally starving to death. That was March 5th, folks. That was a long time ago. That was a month and a half ago. I assure you, it is much worse today. And as the Secretary of State himself said last month, 100% of the population is now permanently dependent on external food. And as you're about to hear from another Jewish person, another Jewish American, who's going to call out Netanyahu's mendacity on the House of the United States Senate floor, it's even worse than you thought.
And Mr. President, the killing has not stopped. Over the weekend, 139 Palestinians were killed and 251 were injured. Of these, 29 were killed in and around Rafah, including 20 children and 6 women, one of whom was pregnant. Just today, more news emerged about mass graves found by Palestinian health authorities and UN observers at the Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis and the Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. So far, more than 300 bodies have been found. The UN Human Rights Office reports that the dead include elderly people, women, and wounded people, and that some have been bound and stripped of their clothes. Some of these bodies apparently had their hands tied, the UN said.
And he spoke actually for 25 minutes. I wish I could have just posted the whole thing here for you to actually see, because there was so much factual information he put about what's going on, to include that Netanyahu, as we've mentioned on here before, again, open source information, no secrets here, not anything you can't find if you just do a little Google search. For years, he has tried to, or not tried to, he supported Hamas. He ensured they got money so that they stayed in power. His thought was, I'm going to keep them weak, but in power, because they're so abhorrent, and they call in their doctrine for the elimination of the Israeli state, that no one will ever force us to have a two-state solution, because I can keep pointing to who's my partner here, the guys he keeps in power. He kept the Palestinian Authority weak and separated so that the two sides squabble over it, supporting each so that they won't be able to come together and have a unified voice in there, so that he would never have to have a two-state solution. That's been the plan. As Bernie Sanders pointed out in that same speech, it's American, at least publicly stated, policy that there be a two-state solution. Biden keeps saying that over and over. They're empty words. It means nothing, because we don't hold Israel to anything, and we keep giving them everything they ask for. $26 billion in this current package here, which also included some stuff for the people in Palestine. But the vast majority was for bombs and bullets for Israel to continue its operations here. That's the reality of it. Netanyahu is staunchly, adamantly, publicly opposed to a two-state solution. He just is just unequivocal in it. Then why does Biden keep saying it's our policy for a two-state solution? Why does the Secretary of State keep saying, well, I think we're going to go for a two-state solution? You've seen us publish this stuff all over the place for months now. And it's just empty words. That's the state of our country right now. That's the state of our leadership. We keep having empty words that mean nothing. We keep funding all these wars that can't succeed, and they're not going to succeed. It makes the arms manufacturers happy, makes some people who work in those industries happy. but it's catastrophic for the people of Ukraine. It's catastrophic for the people of Palestine. And it's catastrophic for our credibility and reputation and soul on the world stage for the United States right now. We have always stood for at least in some measure. I'm naive enough to think that we were ever always good. We never were, never have been, and because we're human, we never will be. But at least in large measure, for much of our existence, we have actually cared about people. We've been willing to sacrifice our own lives for the benefit of others. And we have certainly helped people all around the world when they've been in this situation, when they've been abused and hurt by more powerful people. And now we've just thrown that to the four winds. And I assure you that people all over the world, the global South, Asia, even parts of Europe, and now increasingly even in the West and the United States in particular, they're starting to say, this is just beyond the pale. And that's why they're starting to protest. These probably will continue on, especially if the next phase of this war starts the way Israel says it is. This was earlier this afternoon from an Israeli leader talking about what's about to come.
Yes, I can confirm Israel is moving ahead with our operation to target Hamas in Rafah. We will, as usual, be making every effort to move civilians out of harm's way as we have done in the past. We believe that we've destroyed at least 18 or 19 of Hamas's 24 battalions, but the 4 battalions which remain in Rafah cannot be shielded from Israel.
Now, I've already told you, so I won't regurgitate it, that even if they so-called get those 4 battalions, whatever that even means, the anger and the hatred against Israel by all of the surviving male population is just going to be off the charts. So what Netanyahu claims is that's going to bring peace is going to bring instability. It's going to bring the exact opposite. But in the near term, it's going to bring a spike in the death. There's allegedly some 40,000 tents and some other things that are in the area that are being put in there that are supposedly going to move these people out. We'll see if that actually happens or not. But we're seeing, as Bernie Sanders talked about, they're already bombing in Rafah right now. People are dying every single day. And if they start a ground operation, even if they try to get people out of the way, the numbers is just going to go through the roof. And this, all these movements you see around the world are only going to intensify. The seeds for Israel's future insecurity will be planted deeper, and they'll be watered with more blood. And all of these things are for the long-term instability of Israel. They're a deeper shame on the character and the heart of America. It's going to take a generation to get rid of a lot of this stuff. And that assumes that we can get this stopped soon enough. There is so much harm and so much damage to come from this. So when you people see people celebrating the passage of this money, and this claims that it's going to be good for Ukraine, claims that it's going to be good for Israel and bring peace to both, it's a lie. It's a lie. And folks, this is going to be one of those times when I'm going to ask you not just to say, yeah, and like and subscribe our channel, whatever. I'm going to ask you to do something. Write a letter to your members of Congress. Write a letter to your local newspapers. Take this clip, this video here. Tag it on everybody, social media. Tag it onto your local media. Tag it to your representatives. Tag it to your state representatives, to your state governments, to your mayor, anyone. Let's get this word out there that we're sick and tired of being lied to by our government all the time. That we're tired of these actions here which enrich certain segments of our industry at the expense of the blood of other peoples. Let's say that no more in our names. I'm tired of it, and I hope you are too, and I hope you'll do whatever you can with the voice you have and your reach on social media, whatever it is. Let's get this out there so that we can at least limit the damage and maybe, just maybe, start holding some of these people accountable for carrying the water of some other government and start caring about our own people and start doing something that makes some sense. That's what we hope. Thanks for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. I know this is a little bit different than some of the shows that we typically have, but this is just a really, really an emotional issue for me because it just grieves my soul to see our actions and how they have such negative reactions to other people. And of course, tomorrow we ask you to come back. There's going to be the Daniel Davis Intel briefing, which has now become a new regular at noon tomorrow Eastern time. And then also at 2 p.m., we have a real treat. We're going to have David Sachs in. He's going to talk about some of these things from his perspective. And you're not going to want to miss that. He's a real newsmaker and a mover and shaker in our country. And you'll want to tune in to see that. Thank you very much. And again, send this out to everybody you can. And we'll see you tomorrow on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.